All right, good morning. Hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving. All right. Good to see everybody here this morning. We are about to wrap this up. I think I said that last week, but I was really being honest. We are about to wrap this up. Our study through the books of Samuel. It'll be in chapter 18 of 2 Samuel this morning. Probably this week and next week we'll probably finish this off. We've taken this in pretty large chunks. We ended last week, as the narrative kind of takes us through David's son Absalom, who is making a play for the throne, and David has fled Jerusalem. And Absalom is gathering the army, and they're getting ready to go after him. There may be more than one, but one that is specifically referenced. One of the Psalms that's referenced to the time when David flees Jerusalem. It's Psalm 3. O Lord, how many are my foes? Many are rising against me. Many are saying of my soul, there is no salvation for him in God. But you, O Lord, are a shield about me, my glory and the lifter of my head. I cry aloud to the Lord, and he answered me from his holy hill. I lay down and slept. I woke again, for the Lord sustained me. I will not be afraid of many thousands of people who have set themselves against me all around. Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God, for you strike all my enemies on the cheek. You break the teeth of the wicked. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Your blessing be on your people. As Absalom has gathered quite an army throughout Israel and has made his way into Jerusalem to take power, and David has fled, I think this really reflects a lot of the heart of David and the idea of God save me. Because it looks at this point, just sheer numbers-wise, looks like that's how it's going to have to be. Absalom has quite the army. All right, so let's go to chapter 18 as the battle gets ready. David mustered the men who were with him and set over them commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds. David sent out the army, 1/3 under the command of Joab, 1/3 under the command of Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, and 1/3 under the command of Ittai the Gittite. And the king said to the men, I myself will also go out with you. But the men said, you shall not go out, for if we flee, they will not care about us. If half of us die, they will not care about us, but you are worth 10,000 of us. Therefore it is better that you send us help from the city. And the king said to them, whatever seems best to you, I'll do. So the king stood at the side of the gate, while all the army marched out by the hundreds and by the thousands. And the king ordered Joab and Abishai and Ittai, deal gently for my sake with the young man Absalom. And all the people heard when the king gave orders to all the commanders about Absalom. The fight is not over, not necessarily over territory. It's not Israel's battle with her enemies somewhere else. This is all internal, and it really all comes down to two men, Absalom and David. And the commanders of David's army have a pretty good bead on this. To say that, to tell David, you stay here because this is all they're after. You're all they're after. The rest of us can take care of business on the field, but you stay here. We're going to notice that Absalom does not have that same, he has had that same counsel, but he turned it down. Ahithophel had said, if we just send 12,000 people after David as he flees Jerusalem, we can end this thing quickly. Hushai, I believe, is the other one who says, no, you need to gather an army and go, and Absalom goes as the head of the army. And David David stays back in the city. Now, the author of Samuel kind of inadvertently, I guess, or maybe just kind of a sideways slap towards David, back when David stayed in the city of Jerusalem when it was time for the armies to go to war, and that's what happens with David and Bathsheba. But here there's no hint of David shirking responsibility. He's where his commanders have told him to stay, and he said he'll send support from the city. Okay, so we've had this build-up, and it's been quite a build-up to the battle of what all Absalom's done and the way he's worked, politically to get people on his side, the way he's marched back into Jerusalem and taken over, and the way David has fled. And so we have this big setup, and the battle itself is narrated in about 3 verses. Verse 6, the army went out into the field against Israel. The battle was fought in the forest of Ephraim. The men of Israel were defeated there by the servants of David, and the loss there was great on that day, 20,000 men. The battle spread all over the face of the country, and the forest devoured more people that day than the sword. The end. That's the battle. No big strategies of here's how they drew up and here's how they lured one into the other spot. And I think it's meant. I think it's meant this way, is to understand that God's got the battle, and there's not going to be any doubt about it. It reminded me a little bit of the book of Revelation. Okay? So if you go to the book of Revelation and you start looking about these massive armies of good and evil that are drawing up battle lines, and you see Jesus as the king, the one who rides the white horse, and on his leg is the name of the Son of God. He's the conqueror, he's the king, he's on this, and we're all geared up for this battle, and it's over like that. Not a big fight, but God is going to win. And I think that's what we see here. God has not left the side of David. He told him he hadn't. He told him that his sin, even the sin with Bathsheba, had been forgiven. There's still going to be consequences from it, but God has not left him. And David has followed in that direction. And we noticed this last week of David's mourning as he leaves Jerusalem, as he is cursed by someone on their way out. And the people say, should we go take care of this guy and kill him? And David says, no, if he's received this from God, then this is my punishment and I'll take it. And he goes on. But the battle is over quickly. 20,000 are lost. And I don't really know exactly what this means, again, because we're not given the details of this, but the forest devours more than the sword. But it seems that the army that Absalom is able to muster from all throughout Israel is really no match at all for David and those men who have been with him for this long and understand what it looks like to fight and where. The author of the Bible Speaks Today commentary series, and I wish I could remember her name, but I can't, has pointed out, and I think we mentioned this last week, that you see David at his best as far as leadership in these situations. When he is active, but he is being threatened. We've seen it whenever Saul was chasing him. He gets in most of his trouble whenever things are going well, right? When he has too much time on his hands, which anybody else been there? But anyway, we don't need to stop and talk about those. Right? But he is at his best here. Okay. Let's pick it up in verse 9. Absalom happened to meet the servants of David. Absalom was riding on his mule. The mule went under thick branches of a great oak, and his head was caught fast in the oak, and he was suspended between heaven and earth, while the mule that was under him went on. A certain man saw it and told Joab, "Behold, I saw Absalom hanging in an oak." And Joab said to the man who told him, "What? You saw him. Why then did you not strike him there to the ground? I would have been glad to give you 10 pieces of silver and a belt. The man said to Joab, even if I felt in my hand the weight of 1,000 pieces of silver, I would not reach out my hand against the king's son, for in our hearing the king commanded you and Abishai and Ittai, for my sake protect the young man Absalom. On the other hand, if I had dealt treacherously against his life, and there is nothing hidden from the king, then you yourself would have stood aloof. And Joab said, I will not waste time like this with you. And he took 3 javelins in his hand and thrust them into the heart of Absalom while he was still alive in the oak. And 10 young men, Joab's armor-bearers, surrounded Absalom and struck him and killed him. Joab blew the trumpet. Troops came back from pursuing Israel, for Joab restrained them. And he took Absalom and threw him into a great pit in the forest and raised over him a very great heap of stones. All Israel fled, everyone to his own home. Now Absalom in his lifetime had taken and set up for himself the pillar that is in the king's valley, for he said, I have no son to keep my name in remembrance. And he called the pillar after his own name, and it is called Absalom's monument to this day. Something was said about Absalom when we talked about his appearance, when the author describes his appearance, that there was no one like Absalom in all of Israel that was as handsome, right? Sole of the foot, the top of his head, no blemish. And then every year when he would cut his hair, how much his hair weighed. I was right there with him until the hair thing, okay? Then I lost it, okay? But commentators have said, Absalom, the problem with Absalom seems to be, and it seems to be his pride. He doesn't stay back and let the armies fight. He wants to go out and lead them and be seen as the guy in front. We do notice, again, that this battle is not about one tribe of Israel taking over possession of another. This is about 2 men. This is about the king. And as soon as Absalom is dead, Joab restrains the rest of the army and says, that's it. That's enough. Okay? But Absalom is riding, and this hair, and so there's commentators who say, well, Absalom had not cut his hair because he wanted everyone to know who he was. Right? This was kind of the symbol of who he is. Okay, maybe not. But it's certainly possible. But it gets caught in a tree. I read this, I just can't help but almost laugh. It's almost funny. If it wasn't quite so tragic, it would be. But the report that comes back, and a certain man saw it and told Joab, "Hey, I saw Absalom hanging in a tree." Huh? Like this is an everyday sight, Joab wants Absalom dead. David does not. David's instruction to the leaders of the army in the hearing of the entire army is, be gentle with Absalom for my sake. It's hard for us to get into this, to try to get into somebody else's head, much less somebody else from thousands of years ago. I would imagine, and this is only a guess, that David sees himself as responsible for what's going on with Absalom. Somewhat. And it's hard not to. When we read the story, we kind of see it. All of this continues to stem from David's sin with Bathsheba. It's when he's confronted that Nathan said, there's trouble coming. God has said there's trouble coming from within your own house because you've done this. It's hard for David to just sweep that under the rug. He is a soldier. He's a man very familiar with battle and how things work. And I don't think that there's much doubt that he knows what has to be done. I mean, This is how this is going to have to end. And we've noticed Absalom's character from the time of the rape of his sister is one that will bide his time and then exact revenge. Chances are, and we have no way of knowing this, but just to kind of guess, and what we've seen as far as the pattern of his life so far is that if he's allowed to remain alive, that something like this can happen again. So Joab is a little bit upset that this particular soldier didn't go ahead and kill Absalom. And he said, no, not me. And maybe he knows, we're going to learn a little bit more about Joab a little bit later on. It probably won't be this week, but as we finish up. But he seems to indicate that Joab can't be trusted. Joab said, I'd have paid you. I'd have given you 10 pieces of silver, I'd given you a belt, whatever that looks like. I'm not 100% sure what that means. And he said, even if you give me 1,000 pieces of silver, I know how the king's going to react, and you're going to step back and let me take it. And so Joab deals with it himself. Against the explicit orders of the king, kills Absalom. And Absalom, who is kind of picture him as kind of a peacock kind of guy, right? He's got the hair, he's got the looks, he's got the army, he's got it all. Kind of struts in, has set himself up a monument in the Valley of the Kings, ends up thrown in a pit and some stones thrown over him. Meets a pretty ignoble end. How's that? After Joab blows the trumpet and they come back, somebody's going to have to tell David the news. All right, verse 19. Now Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok, said, let me run and carry the news to the king, that the Lord has delivered him from the hand of his enemies. And Joab said to him, you are not to carry news today. You may carry news another day, but today you shall carry no news, because the king's son is dead. And Joab said to the Cushite, go tell the king what you've seen. The Cushite bowed before Joab and ran. Then Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok, said again to Joab, come what may, let me also run after the Cushite. And Joab said, why will you run, seeing that you will have no reward for the news? Come what may, he said, I will run. So he said to him, then run. And Ahimaaz ran by the way of the plain and outran the Cushite. David was sitting between the two gates, and the watchman went up to the roof by the gate, to the gate by the wall. And when he lifted up his eyes and looked, he saw a man running alone. The watchman called out and told the king, and the king said, if he is alone, there is news in his mouth. And he drew nearer and nearer. The watchman saw another man running. The watchman called to the gate and said, see, another man is running alone. The king said, he also brings news. The watchman said, I think the running of the first is like the running of Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok. The king said, he is a good man and comes with good news. Ahimaaz cried out to the king, all is well, and he bowed before the king with his face to the earth. Blessed be the Lord your God, who has delivered up the men who raised their hand against my lord the king. And the king said, is it well with the young man Absalom? Ahimaaz answered, when Joab sent the king's servant, your servant, I saw a great commotion, but I don't know what it was. And the king said, turn aside and stand here. So he turned aside and stood still. Behold, the Cushite came, and the Cushite said, good news for my lord the king. For the Lord has delivered you this day from the hand of all who rose up against you. The king said to the Cushite, is it well with the young man Absalom? And the Cushite answered, may the enemies of my lord the king and all who rise up against you for evil be like that young man. And the king was deeply moved and went up to the chamber over the gate and wept. And as he went, he said, oh, my son Absalom, would I had died instead of you, O Absalom, my son, my son. David has received news of the death of others before, and usually it did not go well for the messengers. Right? When David's enemy, as we saw early, is Saul. And Saul is surrounded by the Philistines and is wounded in battle and then dies, kills himself. When news comes back, and the news comes back from an Amalekite that says, "Yeah, I saw him. He was wounded, and I think he thought he was trying to be, trying to kind of make himself out to be something that he really wasn't." Said, "And I saw him, and he was wounded, and he begged me, and I killed him." And David said, "You should not raise your hand against the Lord's anointed," and had that man executed. Things don't usually go well, and it's a little puzzling to me that there's a fight over who gets to take this news. I'm not sure I'd been standing in the front of the line. Right? Knowing what I knew and knowing what he had said about do not, be gentle, somehow 3 javelins through the heart doesn't seem gentle with Absalom. I don't know that I would want to be the one to run back and say, "Here's what happened." Ahimaaz, when he gets back, I still don't quite get this unless he has second thoughts while he runs as well. When David says, "And what about Absalom?" Well, there was big commotion, but I don't really know what happened. I mean, that's not good. Joab seems to think that Ahimaaz's desire to go tell David means, and he wants a reward. I think we all could see that's not going to happen. But he doesn't say anything. But Joab delegates this work of carrying the news to David to a Cushite, which maybe somewhat of a foreigner to Israel. Maybe because he thinks he knows what's going to happen when the news is delivered. The Cushite has he doesn't hold back at all. I mean, he seems to be happy about this and really thinks David will be. May it be to all of the enemies of my Lord the King what happened to that young man. David does not take this well. Now, neither one of them die. He doesn't have either one of them executed at this point. But he does go and weep. I do want to get into this. Let's start in 19. And it was told to Joab, "Behold, the king is weeping and mourning for Absalom." So the victory that day was turned into mourning for all the people, for the people heard that day. The king is grieving for his son. And the people stole into the city that day, as people steal in who are ashamed when they flee in battle. The king covered his face, and the king cried with a loud voice, "O my son Absalom! O Absalom, my son, my son!" Joab came into the house to the king and said, You have today covered with shame the faces of all your servants, who have this day saved your life, and the lives of your sons and your daughters, and the lives of your wives and your concubines, because you love those who hate you and hate those who love you. For you have made it clear today that commanders and servants are nothing to you. For today I know that if Absalom were alive and all of us were dead today, then you would be pleased. Now therefore arise, go out, speak kindly to your servants, for I swear by the Lord, if you do not go, not a man will stay with you this night, and this will be worse for you than all the evil that's come upon you from your youth until now. The king arose and took his seat in the gate, and the people were all told, Behold, the king is sitting in the gate. And the people came before the king. Okay, seems a little harsh. But David's failure to celebrate the victory, instead choosing to weep for Absalom, has really, really demoralized the people who followed him out of Jerusalem to go and fight this battle. It said they stole into the city as those who steal into the city when they're ashamed. Joab, there's a lot we can be said about Joab, but one thing is that Joab is pretty gutsy. To speak like this to the king would indicate that he's not really afraid of this, but of going, you need to pull it together. Because if you don't, what we've experienced so far is nothing compared to what we will. Because nobody will stand with you if this is how you're going to do. If we try to put ourselves in David's shoes for just a minute or two, and remember, I think we can remember, and I think it to be accurate, the guilt that he probably carries because of what's gone on in his house, what's gone on with Absalom, the way that he brought Absalom back to Jerusalem but then ignored him and would not have anything to do with him, the way that he has kind of his inaction or his or even his direct action toward Absalom has caused some of this. It's kind of hard for him to deal with. But for him to lose a son, and a son that seems to be the heir apparent, right? Amnon's dead. Absalom seems to fit the bill for the king. Is quite a blow. But Joab says, if we can paraphrase it, get over it. We did what we had to do. You did what had to be done. The word that keeps getting repeated throughout this, and we noticed it, picked it up last week, and I don't know, I didn't go through and count, the number of times king is repeated in talking about David. A reminder to us as the readers, and a reminder, hopefully, we would hope that David would recognize, this is your spot. You are the anointed one of Israel. You are the one that God chose to do this. And God is with you. He has been with you, and He's still with you. And the ancient Near Eastern view of battle is if you win, God is on your side. Of going, you're not helping your cause here. It reminded me of another narrative that goes back quite a bit further. And it's in Leviticus. Leviticus 10. If you remember what goes on in Leviticus 10, but that's the death of Nadab and Abihu. Okay? We know what they did, or we know they did something. We don't know exactly what it was. All it is they offered strange fire to God. And God strikes them dead. And then He tells Aaron, suit up as the high priest and do not mourn them. And that seems harsh. But to Israel, I believe it's supposed to be a confirmation of where does the loyalty of Aaron lie? Does it lie with God or with his sons? God says, you are the high priest and you are to guide my people. They stepped out of the position, which is amazing to me because these are two people who have been up on the mountain with God and still did it. And He says, you don't mourn them, we move on. And it may be something similar here of Joab saying, in effect, is your loyalty to God the one whose people you are going to lead? the one who chose you from being a shepherd and put you over his people, Israel? Is your loyalty to him who has saved you from this, or is it to Absalom who tried to take the throne? And David takes his advice. All right? All right, let's keep going. We got a little bit of time left. Israel had fled, every man to his own home. All the people were arguing throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, "The king delivered us from the hand of our enemies, saved us from the hand of the Philistines. Now he has fled out of the land from Absalom. But Absalom, whom we anointed over us, is dead in battle. Now, therefore, why do you say nothing about bringing the king back?" King David sent this message to Zadok and Abiathar the priest. "Say to the elders of Judah, why should you be the last to bring the king back to his house when the word of all Israel has come to the king? You're my brothers. You're my bone and my flesh. Why then should you be the last to bring back the king? And say to Amasa, are you not my bone and my flesh? God do so to me and more also if you are not commander of my army from now on in the place of Joab." He swayed the heart of all the men of Judah as one man, so that they sent word to the king, "Return, both you and all your servants." The king came back to the Jordan, and Judah came to Gilgal to meet the king and to bring the king over the Jordan. I think there's probably some nervousness on the part of the elders of Judah. I mean, why wouldn't there be? They've anointed Absalom as king, and now he's dead. What's going to happen when David comes home? There's a little bit of tension seen here that'll play out not terribly long from this point, a generation or so. A little tension seen here between Israel and Judah. That all of Israel knows that David is the king. All Israel knows that David is the one that's going to come back in Judah. Why are you waiting? Shouldn't you be the first? And so there is some tension that's going to get, we've seen it already in small places here and there, that's going to really get blown up after the death of Solomon. And we see the kingdom divided. But we see some of its roots back to here. I do want to point this out, that Joab has now been replaced as the commander of the army of David with the one who is the commander of Absalom's army. It's hard for me to see it any other way than punishment. Maybe there's something else there. But you'll be the commander in place of Joab. Joab who killed Absalom against the orders of the king, and who walked into the king's room and said, "All right, put on your big boy pants and let's get busy." Right? But he's going to be replaced. And so Judah comes out to meet the king back at the Jordan, and he's going to come back into Jerusalem. Shimei, the son of Gera, the Benjamite from Bahurim, hurried to come down with the men of Judah to meet King David. With him were 1,000 men from Benjamin, and Ziba, the servant of the house of Saul, with his 15 sons, his 20 servants, rushed down to the Jordan before the king. And they crossed the ford to bring over the king's household and to do his pleasure. And Shimei, the son of Gera, fell down before the king as he was about to cross the Jordan. And he said to the king, "Let not my lord hold me guilty, or remember how your servant did wrong on the day my lord the king left Jerusalem. Do not let the king take it to heart. For your servant knows that I have sinned. Therefore, behold, I have come this day, the first of all the house of Joseph, to come down to meet my lord the king." And Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, answered, "Shall not Shimei be put to death for this, because he cursed the Lord's anointed?" But David said, "What have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah, that you should this day be as an adversary to me? Shall anyone be put to death in Israel this day? For do I not know that I am this day king over Israel?" And the king said to Shimei, "You shall not die." The king gave him his oath. Shimei was the one who cursed David on the way out, throwing things at him. He is a Benjamite. He is from the same tribe as Saul. And now that David is headed back toward the holy city, here he comes. Right? Hope you didn't take that personally, right? Kind of hard not to. And David's men that are with him are incredibly loyal. Okay, and that's their instinct. Everyone, well, he needs to die. And David says no. Again, this is not about territory in Israel. This is not about one tribe taking over for others. This is about two men, and one of them's dead now. And David says nobody else needs to die because of this. It's an incredibly gracious act, I think, from somebody who has the ability to silence this right now. To say, no. Nobody dies here. We're not going to kill you for this. Mephibosheth, the son of Saul, came down to meet the king, had neither taken care of his feet, nor trimmed his beard, nor washed his clothes from the day the king departed until the day he came back in safety. When he came to Jerusalem to meet the king said to him, "Why did you not go with me, Mephibosheth?" He said, "My lord, O king, my servant deceived me, for your servant said to him, I'll saddle a donkey for myself, that I may ride on it and go with the king, for your servant is lame. He has slandered your servant to my lord the king, but my lord the king is like the angel of God. Do therefore what seems good to you. For all my father's house were men doomed to death before my lord the king, but you set your servant among those who eat at your table. What further right have I then to cry to the king?" And the king said to him, "Why speak any more of your affairs? I have decided you and Ziba shall divide the land." And Mephibosheth said to the king, "Oh, let him take it all, since my lord the king has come safely home." A lot of grace being extended here. Ziba was one of the servants of Saul. Again, he almost had to have one of those whiteboards that the major league managers keep in the dugout, so you can keep track of the names and who's going in and who's coming out and all that kind of stuff. Right? He had inherited, or at least had some of Saul's lands, and then when David learns of Mephibosheth, which is the son of Jonathan, he had made a promise to Jonathan, and he gives that land back to Mephibosheth, who is lame in both feet. But he is like one of David's own. He eats at his table. When David flees Jerusalem, Ziba comes out and brings him food, brings him donkeys, brings all this stuff to him. And David asked about Mephibosheth, and Ziba said he decided to stay because he thinks that Absalom's going to be king, and he thinks he'll just stay there. Right? That's kind of a rough paraphrase, but that's pretty much it. However, it's not the case. Mephibosheth wanted to go, and Ziba ran off and left him. And so what should be done now? And David said, well, then why don't the two of you just split Saul's land? And Mephibosheth goes, I don't want it. I don't need it. All I needed was for you to be back so I can be back to the way things were. I think that's kind of nice. But we see David he's still being gracious, pardoning his enemies. I know this is going to break your heart, but let's stop there. The rest of this chapter goes through more of this kind of thing of David's graciousness as he comes back, and then we'll deal with the next rebellion that comes, and we should wrap up the books of Samuel next week. From there, I want us to take just a brief look, and I know I said this would be a brief look, but I think it has been, because there's a lot of chapters in 1st and 2nd Samuel, and we've covered them relatively quickly. I want us to take a brief look when we finish up 2nd Samuel, just a quick overview of the kings of Israel. Okay? Just kind of a feel for who they are, and not just that, but we're going to take a look with that how the prophets that we read later come into that history, right? Because those prophets are folded back into the history of the kings. And we'll get to see kind of what happens with the divided kingdom. It helps make some more sense of other things that we'll read a little bit later on as we make our way through. But I really, really appreciate your attention. I know this isn't the most riveting stuff. Some of it is good if you really like the battle scenes and that kind of thing. Again, we don't want to get lost in the weeds here. We're just a reminder of who these people are and kind of the way God has worked with them, right, and the way God's dealt with them. Because really the Bible itself is the story of God. It's meant to introduce us to the author. And inside we'll find ourselves in many of these places, sometimes on the right side and sometimes on the wrong, and understanding what it is that God expects and how we deal with that. Does that make sense? Okay, just a couple of you. Good. All right. Let's have our prayers as we close. Father, we thank you so much for today. We thank you for this time of year where we pause and we give thanks for all that we have, and it's just a reminder of the great blessings that you give us. We pray that we'll be people who are grateful each day for the various gifts and the various opportunities that you give and you provide. We are humbled that you would like to work through and with incredibly flawed people like us, and incredibly flawed people like the ones we read about here in what you've left for us to find. We thank you so much for your great mercy and love and provision. And what we want, Father, is to be your people, is to look more like you and to walk in a way that reflects who you are. We're so thankful for your Son, who you sent, who was suspended between heaven and earth so that we could have a relationship with you. We're thankful for that great gift, and Father, help us to walk worthy of it each and every day. We love you so much. In Jesus' name, amen.